welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure and each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joy St. Germain, and today's program is Owls and UFO Contact, and I am out in beautiful Saranac Lake, upstate New York, with Mike Cleland, and we're at the Doctor's Inn in the Adirondacks. It is literally like 0 degrees out right now, so we've got a nice cozy fire, and I welcome you in joining us. Now, Mike is an author, a researcher, an experiencer, and he has graciously agreed to do 2 shows. And when you find out how fascinating he is and what he has to share, you'll know why we can't fit it into one. Thank you, Mike. I want to first, because we have so much to cover, I want to first share the books that you've written. The Messengers, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. Book 2, Stories from the Messengers, Accounts of Owls, UFOs, and a Deeper Reality. Where to begin? It's such an interesting, fascinating, and unusual topic.
Well, thank you for having me. And yes, it is a fascinating topic, and it is a very personal topic for me. It comes from firsthand experience. I went through a period beginning in around 2006. It's 2019 now, so that's 13 years ago. I started having experiences with owls. I saw a lot of owls. I had a lot of owl synchronicities, and some of them were very powerful. And I started asking around, started looking into animal totems and such. But there's a story that took place that could set the scene a little better. So in 2006, I was 44 years old. I'm 56 now, and I did a single night camping with a friend of mine. Her name is Kristen. We went out into the mountains for one night. My cat may show up here. You want to jump up here, kitty?
Hi, Spazzy.
Come on,
Hopefully Spazzy will introduce herself.
There we go. So we'll put Spazzy.
She's the resident kitty.
So I was living at the time just outside of Grand Teton National Park, and I went camping for one night, and there was a friend in town. Actually, I didn't really know this person very well. And I basically said, let's go camping for one night. And she said yes. And we went into the mountains, and at sunset, I was sitting on a big flat rock cooking dinner. And we went very light. We didn't have a tent because it was going to be a beautiful night. We could tell just by the weather. So we didn't even bother carrying a tent into the mountains. And I was making dinner and having a conversation. There was this point in the conversation where I was kind of struck, where I was like, this person's really deep, and this person's really smart, and I didn't expect that, and it's really thoughtful. And at that moment, an owl flew over. And then a second owl. And then a third owl. And for the next couple of hours, as the sun set and the stars came out, these owls flew around us. They landed on branches near us. They got into the trees near us. And we lay down under the stars and without a tent to sleep, set our pads down, and as we were lying there, the owls would swoop over our faces. They're very silent in flight, and they were swooping over our faces so the stars would be blocked out for just a half a second. So really, go on.
I'm sorry. Did you realize at the time this is something really extraordinary?
Oh yeah. We were all about it. We were like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Yes. Oh, no doubt. We were all over the fact that this was like owl-rific. I don't know. So the next day we were like, wow, owls, that was really incredible. That was amazing. And then we walked out of the mountains, and I said, hey, let's one night. I do this a lot. I like to go out in the mountains for one night and camp for just one night. And it's an easy access, short drive from my house. And let's do it again. If I do it again, I'll call you. So I did. A couple days later, we called. Went to the mountains, same thing, light packs. This time we did have a tent because it was colder and the weather was a little unsettled. So, sunset. Watching the sunset, an owl flies over us. Another owl lands on a branch, and a third owl lands at our feet. Now before, there's 3 owls. I'm convinced they were the same 3 owls. But 3 owls, before they were kind of laying in a branch way out there. This time they were landing right next to us. They were standing on the ground right in front of us. And both times, at the time, now I did not talk about this at the time. I'm talking about it now. Both times, real owls, seeing real owls, they were, 10, 11 inches high. They were short-eared owls. They're beautiful owls. And both times I had a voice in my head that said, this has something to do with the UFOs.
Were you interested in UFOs?
Yes, I was reading a lot of UFO literature now. At that point in my life, I had these experiences, some of which going back to boyhood. When I was 12, I had an experience of missing time in association with a bright orange light in the neighborhood. Also, when I was 12, I saw a craft of some sort, structured craft, looked like it's shaped like a coffee can, sort of descending in the sky at a very odd angle. Me and another friend watched it, and then it disappeared. I used to say the lights went out. And I always knew I was lying. It disappeared.
Did you have an overall emotional response to UFOs, like positive, negative, curious, neutral?
Oh, it wasn't neutral. I was very curious. I mean, I was the perfect age. I was a 12-year-old boy, and this was the era of what's his name? Leonard Nimoy did a TV show called In Search Of, and I loved that show. So yes, I was totally not neutral at all. I was always super curious, and so at 12 years old, you see this, and the rest, and it's like then you read a UFO report, you're like, well, I saw one. So, and I also had an event when I was 30. I was no longer a little boy anymore. I was 30. I was living alone in a house in Maine, and I woke up in the middle of the night. There was a bright light shining through the bedroom window. And I sat up in bed and looked at this bright light, and I looked out, and there were 5 gray, spindly, alien beings walking towards the house. Now that's a scary sight. I mean, they were close to the house. It wasn't with a house out in the middle of nowhere. They were coming towards the house, and I should have jumped out of bed. I should have locked the doors. I should have barricaded myself. I should have got a baseball bat. I didn't do anything. I had a voice in my head that said, oh yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down. And that's
Not go to sleep. Shut.
That's the memory I have. And I remember I even took some notes afterwards, but that's my memory. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down. That's exactly what I did. I put my head on the pillow and I was out instantly. Having immersed myself in UFO research and abduction research in the last 20 plus years, 30 years almost, these things are very normal. What I'm repeating right here. I didn't know them at the time, but now I've heard many similar accounts. Now, back to that event in the mountains. So that was 2006. At that point in my life, right? So you put a tea kettle on the stove. There's a point when it's going to whistle. Right? You can almost sense there's this tension that's just about to whistle. Something is about to happen. That's where I was in my life. I knew I had to look at these events. I knew Kitty, come on, come up here. So I knew I had to look at these events. They were simmering. The water was just about to start boiling. Now, and I had denied them, I had ignored them, and so I was now at the point where I realized I was going to need to look into them. So it wasn't the memories in my youth or seeing aliens out my window. It was the owls that sort of forced me into looking at this. It was that voice in my head that said, this has something to do with UFOs, seeing real owls. So I started looking into it. I started contacting people. I started talking to researchers. I started talking to other people who've had the experience. And I would ask the question to everyone, like, do you have any experiences with owls? Weird experiences with owls? Now, it wasn't all of them, but I was seeing a pattern. People were saying, no one's ever asked me that. Yeah, I do. And they would tell me the weirdest story.
Well, Mike, I've been doing UFO research for a while, and as a hypnotherapist and regressionist, I've regressed many people back to recalling deeper memories. I never heard the association of owls and UFOs until I met you. And I don't think it's a common, like, oh yeah, I knew that. I think you kind of onto something.
Well, I wasn't, so other people had, Whitley Strieber in his book Communion had written about owls on page 21. I've footnoted it so many times at this point. That is, my opinion, the first point in nonfiction, and that's 87, I think that book came out. So that was the first point in where owls are inextricably linked to the UFO contact experience. That's
See,
only.
I purposely
Yeah.
didn't read things
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be colored. I have preconceived ideas when I regressed people, so this is the first I'm
Yeah.
hearing about that.
There's certainly other fleeting references, but that was a very, very concrete one, which wasn't that long ago. What is more important to me in a way at this point is the ancient lore of the owl and how it ties into the modern UFO contact report. I mean, people are having symbolic experiences with owls. An owl is, I'm going to jump to the deepest waters here, the owl is not simply a bird with big eyes. It is an archetype. It is a powerful, majestic creature that is imbued with mythological and symbolic energy. Right? So you go to the movie theater, you watch Star Wars, you are watching Luke Skywalker running around with the laser beam and fighting the good fight. What you are actually seeing is an archetype of a hero. Right? So you're watching something on one level, on a deeper level, something much deeper is going on. You see an owl, you're also seeing the archetypal power of that owl. You may not know it, you may not be aware of it, but you're sensing it. I'm convinced you're sensing it on a very deep level. Yes, there's lots of owls. Owls fly around, but so here, this is a totally normal kind of report. Somebody's in the woods, they look up, they say, there's an owl on the top of that tree. Isn't that amazing? The owl flies off, and then a craft flies directly over them, usually a triangle-shaped craft. And it happens 1, 2. I have more often the accounts of owls first, and then the craft. I have some the other way around, but not many. So the owl would be. So I have these theories on why the owls are, and people, like my publisher Richard Dolan was kind of like, Mike, you can't dodge this question. People would say, so what's the meaning of owls? And I would basically say, I don't know. I'm struggling with it. And he's like, you can't dodge that question anymore. So I got some answers. One of them is owls are here to announce initiation. They are here the same way as if you were like in a corny movie, and someone is going to meet the king, right? They walk into a room, and before the event, there's like a guard at the door that allows them to enter. In a way, that's what the owl is. They're here to announce initiation. Now, I have no proof of that. This is a very tidy way of trying to sum this up. Here, let me jump back to the camping story with Kristen. So I started a blog, an online blog, in kind of a existential flurry in 2009. That was 3 years after the event with seeing the owls in the mountains. And I put a post online. One of the very first posts I put was a story I just told about the owls in the mountains with Kristen, and then I kind of said, I wonder what she was talking about. I can't remember what she was talking about. I remember she was talking about something at that moment when we saw the first owls, that first night. Now so let me just back up a little more. We saw 3 owls on one night. 4 days later, we went camping again, we saw 3 more owls. I got so obsessed after this. The power of that sighting was or those 2 sightings back to back, I was so lost, and I just allowed myself in that. I don't know. I basically fell down into the deep dark pit and wallowed in this owl research. It was not a healthy time for me either. I felt lost in this. And it was through the books and through, I'll actually say it was through the books that I am now a much calmer person than I would have been stepping into this research in 2006. Now, so I contacted Kristen when the blog was online and that initial owl post was up, because I said, what were we talking about? The very first night you were saying something, and she said, oh, I remember exactly what I was saying. I was giving my most heartfelt definition of what God means to me.
Oh.
And then, so all of a sudden I've already lost my mind, basically, right? So, pulling this owl thread. And then it just got all the more intense. it got all the more overwhelming for me. And then the synchronicities were coming fast and furious at that point in my life, and so the owl issue is tied into all this other stuff. We were talked a little bit before. I'm not locked into the UFO contact thing. So owls, UFO contact. Yes, I'm convinced they're connected, but owls are also connected to other highly charged human experiences.
In shamanism.
One of them is in shamanism.
Connections.
One of them is in shamanism, and that even ties into the initiation. So I would almost say the initiatory process of the shaman. Owls show up in people's experiences. I've got a lot of accounts of that.
Yeah, and I can attest to that.
Owls show up in meditation. I have a beautiful story of someone going off into a field, and he stood up in the field right just before he said, "I love to meditate outside." So he went in the field. He stood up just before meditating. He says, "I want to help with the upliftment of mankind." He sat down, meditated, and when he opened his eyes, there was an owl facing him in the field. I have that account in one form or another many times. So this is what he's asking a question. He doesn't get a direct answer the way we might want a direct answer, like a Westerner, but he got a symbolic, archetypal answer presented to him in the form of an owl.
Now, wait, when
go
you
on.
say,
Sorry, you can just
and
butt
I
in any
found
time
out,
sometimes.
and I love listening. I'm enthralled. When you say, and I found out, and I got information, people contact you from all over the world.
So the blog, and I started writing essays, and I started asking people. I was writing about my own owl stories. I was writing about my own owl experiences. People would contact me. So I started writing and posting these online and putting essays. Eventually that turned into books. But even early on, if you Google, and anyone can do this out there, if you Google UFOs, owls, my name is the first thing that comes up. And then you scroll down, it's about the next 15 things under that. So anyone, anywhere in the world, if someone in Finland or Malaysia or Ohio has an experience with an owl and a UFO, and they're curious, I mean, it's 2019, like I'm 2 mouse clicks away from being in a conversation with them. And that has become a bit of a burden in a way because I'm flooded with so many stories, and they're all amazing.
Who would have thought that so many people would be having this? And you last night when we all had a chance to sit and chat, said sometimes you will spend 6 hours listening to someone's account.
Well, doing the research, I think that's true of any UFO abduction researcher, any UFO researcher. If you get on the phone with someone and says, "Tell me your story," it'll unfold, and it'll unfold, and then it'll unfold more, and then it'll keep on unfolding, and it's this kind of madness. That was more the province of the second book, Stories from the Messengers. What happened when I wrote the first book, I felt like I was like it was very common for me to say, "Oh, you know, I'm finding this relationship with UFOs and owls," and I talked to these researchers, and they'd go, "What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense at all. UFOs and owls, I don't get it." So I had to be very formal in the first book and say, "Here's the experiences, here's my interpretation," and I tried to do as little editorializing and speculation. I did plenty of it, but I tried to do as little as possible, and just let the stories tell themselves. Right? That story I just told about the guy meditating. You don't have to add anything to that story. That story sits there on its own as a parable, without needing any explanation. It's open-ended, but still, I'm fine with it. I'm content with that open-ended aspect. And then, Kitty, you want to come up?
Snazzy. Oh, spazzy.
Spazzy.
Spazzy,
Come on.
spazzy.
Come on, she wants to be part of the action. Here you go. So, where was I?
That story kind of
So the first book, I felt I had to be very formal. So you get on someone would say, "I had a powerful owl experience. Let's talk." And I'd talk on the phone, and then 6 hours would go by, or sometimes 6 hours over 1 hour, multiple phone calls. And then I would put it in the book, and it'd be like 3 sentences, their owl experience. And then there was a whole wealth of stuff that had gone on. And often that stuff is very strange. Anne Strieber, the late wife of author Whitley Strieber, she had a simple way that she said, "I have a simple way of knowing if someone's UFO experience is real, if their contact is." She said, "I know if it's not weird, I don't trust it." And that's what I was finding. These stories were so bizarre.
Weird as in compared to other people's stories, or just as a standalone story weird?
No one would make up
Oh,
the
I see what you're
stuff.
saying.
It gets
Okay.
so bizarre. So the point of the second book was to allow some people. So there's 19 stories in the second book, and just to allow those stories to be told fully. Just list all the strangeness, all the disparate threads. Right? So there's synchronicities that tie into the stuff, and it loops back on. And some of it was very difficult to write because these stories are like looped back on over themselves over and over again in this kind of crazy logic, and it was very challenging. Well, it broke my heart in the first book not to be able to put those stories in, and it was very rewarding in the second book to have those long format stories.
Did you know there would be a second book when you were writing the first?
No.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't. No. And yeah, so and then you put these two books together. That's almost 700 pages of owls and UFOs. Okay, you want to read that book, huh, Kitty? And there's almost 700 pages of research on owls and UFOs, and it's still, to me, like a mystery. I mean, I can give some ideas on what I think it might mean, but like this is a powerful, symbolic, mysterious force that's welling up in the context of not just UFO contact, but other things too. And I would say other highly charged human experiences, shamanic initiation. Owls show up a lot around death, and some of those stories are remarkably beautiful and uplifting. There's lore out there of owls being like a harbinger of doom, and those I have not found many of those stories. The stories of certainly the stories can be scary, but the underlying aspect is quite uplifting, and I'm grateful for that because I did not expect that going into that. It was after sort of compiling the research that I came to the conclusion, or the sense or the mood or the vibe of these stories is very uplifting and powerful.
Now, as I'm looking out over this beautiful snow-covered everything, the trees and everything is just magnificent. I'm seeing a little motion of birds flying, and I would not be at all surprised if an owl were to come and land or fly by, and I would be sure to let you and our camera person and our viewers know, because that just wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, we had the plumber came one time, and he came and he said, "You got an owl in that tree out there," and that was the tree right there, that bush right in front of our window.
Good to know.
And so yes, but just heads up, we live in a place with a lot of owls, so there's plenty of owls here, but still, I know I am constantly waiting. Sometimes they show up symbolically, not in the form of a real owl, someone with an owl t-shirt or owl coffee cup mug or the TV commercial, the next thing you see on the, so it can, in owls you have to be careful. Like sometimes an owl's just an owl, but if it's in connection with a highly charged event, that's when I pay attention to it.
Okay, repeat that. I think that's really important for the viewers to understand.
So the highly charged event, the highly charged human experience, talking about God, could be what's going on in the conversation, and then an owl shows up. Owls show up at funerals. That's a highly charged ceremony, highly charged with emotions. Owls show up at funerals. It's very common for people to walk up to the owl and say, it's usually a parent, and say, "Dad, thank you for coming. We miss you. Thank you for being here for me." That and it helps their grieving. I have that story many times. I have my own experience myself with something very similar to that.
Yeah, and of course, as you said, sometimes an owl is just an owl, and it's just being an owl, doing owl things, appearing in a way an owl would, but sometimes not. And I love your description that it usually accompanies a highly charged experience.
That's the ones I
That
pay
sums
attention
it
to.
up.
Yeah.
So, I know you've had the opportunity to talk to many people and to hear many stories. Are people feeling validated? Are people just saying, "I needed to get it off my chest"? What's people's reason for contacting you with the stories?
I think people are left adrift in a way. They have this powerful experience, They have an owl that's in connection with maybe a UFO experience, maybe the death of a parent, maybe an initiation, maybe a powerful dream, and a real owl shows up. We're adrift in society right now. There might have been a chapter when you could go to the shaman at the edge of your village. We don't have that in the same way presently. So these people are adrift and they're asking for my help, and I do the best I can.
Well, I think we have to wrap up this show, and thank you so much for agreeing to stay put so we could do part 2. Thanks for joining us on The Sacred Journey. We'll catch you next time.